In the following lecture, Professor Joseph Cheng, Research Professor of International Business at George Washington University and Professor Emeritus of Business Administration at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign in the USA, examines the opportunities and challenges of an innovation-driven global economy for Hong Kong and explores the business implications.
Delighted to be here to have the opportunity to share some ideas with you concerning the topic of innovation and also competing in an innovation-driven global economy. Now, being a professor, one of our regular tasks is to give exams and to give quizzes. So I'm going to give you an exam or a quiz this morning before I start my talk. So let me go to the next slide. Okay, so we will start with a quiz or an innovation exercise. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the changing basis of global competition. And then the next item will be on managing innovation for global competitiveness. And then specifically, next we'll be talking about Hong Kong. And then I will take questions and exchange ideas with you. So why don't we get to the quizzes, if you will. So this is a very simple quiz. I have a puzzle here, and you see that there are 9 dots. And your task is to connect the 9 dots with 4 straight lines, and you have to do it all in one stroke or one continuous movement without lifting your pen or pencil off the piece of paper. So here are the 9 dots. Now some of you might have already been exposed to or worked on this problem before. If you do know the answer, please keep quiet and don't share it with others. So this is the first puzzle. I'm not going to give you the answer at this point. We will come back to this towards the end of my talk. And I hope that you will not be trying to solve the puzzle while I'm talking. But I just want to show you the puzzle first. So that's the first one. I'm going to show you the next one. The next one has to do with putting in front of you 8 balls, if you will. They are of identical shape, color. 7 of them are of equal weight, but one is heavier. And you are given a scale, and you can only use the scale 2 times to find out which of the 8 balls is heavier. So are we clear with the instructions or the requirements of both questions or puzzles? The first one is you have 9 dots there. And the task is to connect all these 9 dots with 4 straight lines. And you cannot repeat the line. You cannot lift the pen or pencil off the piece of paper. And then the second one is you are given 8 balls. They are all identical in looks and in shape. But one ball is heavier. And you are given a scale to find out which one is heavier. And you can only use the scale 2 times. Now the reason I wanted to give you these 2 puzzles to work with is the way that we approach problems or the way that we approach these 2 puzzles tell us a lot about some of the constraints that we face when we need to innovate. Some of the constraints that are holding us back when we try to be creative. And I will talk more about this towards the end of my talk. So for now, forget about trying to solve the problem, and let us get into some of the issues that I need to talk about concerning global competition. The first message I want to communicate is that for the longest time, efficiency has been the primary basis of economic competition. So what is efficiency? Efficiency is the ratio of output over input. So what we would like to do is to increase the ratio in the sense that we want to get more from less. That is efficiency. And the way that this is done is that you have to know the cause and effect relationships. You have to find out how things work. And then once you know how things work, then you will work on it or practice it to make it as perfect as possible. And then you will increase your productivity. But the trick here, or the requirement here, is that you will have to be doing the same thing over and over to find out the best way to get it done. So efficiency is premised on the fact that you know how things work, and then you practice it, and then over time you will be able to produce more with less. Now, what is interesting is that until recently, there was a lot of underutilized or unused knowledge that has been produced by universities, by corporations, by government laboratories. And as a result, whoever got access to the knowledge would have a competitive advantage. The internet changed all that. With information technologies, with access to information, almost everybody now can get access or get to information or knowledge that was only available to a much smaller group of participants before. So if everybody knows how things work, everybody gets access to the required knowledge, that means knowledge or efficiency will not be a competitive advantage. You have to be efficient in order to stay in the game, and everybody's almost equally efficient now. So in order for you to compete, you need something else. And what that something else is, what I'm going to propose to you is innovation. So if everybody is now getting access to the knowledge that will make you efficient, and almost everybody is now equally efficient, then you need something else to have the competitive advantage. And this something else is innovation. And again, a lot of people use the term innovation, so let me give you a definition here. And this is a very layman's simple definition. At least the way that I understand innovation is you are doing something new and different, and then it's also better in some way. So new and different, and also it is better. And it involves one or two things. One is you create new knowledge. And this new knowledge will allow you to do new things. Or you use the existing knowledge in new ways to solve new problems. But the bottom line here is when we try to innovate, we are going to do something new and different, and hopefully better. Now, in order for us to innovate, we have to also be willing to participate or to engage in two other activities. One is experimentation. You have to experiment. What does experimentation mean? It means there's no sure thing that it will work every time. There will be failures. Experiments mean there will be failures. And then what do you do with failures? You learn from the mistakes. So in order to innovate, you have to be willing to experiment, to accept that there will be failures. And then the second thing, which is also important, you may be even more important, is you have to know how to learn from failures. So to innovate is not easy. It requires you to have the courage to experiment and the courage to face failures. And then the second thing is more important is you have to be willing and find a way to learn from the failure so you can do it better the next time. So with this as the background information, let me move on to the other slide here. So what I have here is to compare two models of competition, or two mindsets, if you will. One is what I call efficiency-driven competition. The other is innovation-driven or innovation-based competition. So on the left-hand side, I have the efficiency that is doing more with less. On the right-hand side is doing new and better things. And then again, on the left-hand side, if you go with the efficiency mindset, what you will focus on as a business person would be price and quantity. On the right-hand side, if you focus on, or if you are into the innovation-based competition, then you will focus on novelty, something new and different, and also on quality. And then the next item is, in regard to knowledge, efficiency is you apply existing knowledge. Innovation is you discover new knowledge. And then the next item is kind of an interesting one because it illustrates how a conversation might go in a company that is, or that has an efficiency culture versus a company that has an innovation culture. If it is an efficiency culture, when a subordinate, if you will, brings a new idea to the supervisor and say, hey, I have a great idea, I want to try this out. The supervisor most likely will say, has this been done before? If it has not been done, what do you think the supervisor will say? Don't do it. It has not been done before. So there may be a risk of it not working. If you work for an innovation-driven company or a company with an innovation culture, if the same conversation takes place between a subordinate and a supervisor, you will have a very different response. Is you go to your supervisor and say, hey, I have a great idea. I want to try it out this way. And then instead of saying, has this been done before? Then the supervisor might say, hey, we have an opportunity to set a new standard. Because this has never been done before, I suppose. That's why it is an innovation, right? So we have an opportunity to be the first mover or the opportunity to set the new standard for the industry. And if that is the case, then we also have the next item for us to think about is in a efficiency-driven culture or organization, benchmarking is a very common practice. So we want to find out what's the best practices that have been done, and then you will copy it or imitate it. And for sure, if it works there, you hope it will work for you. There's less risk involved. But then if you work for an innovation-driven company, an innovation kind of a culture, then the focus will not be so much on benchmarking what has been done or what the other companies are doing, but you are focusing on developing new, next best practices. Again, the mindset is very different. And then again, I talk about innovation involving failure. In an efficiency-driven competition model, failure is viewed negatively. Avoid it. We don't like it. If you're associated with failure, you will be treated or viewed as a problematic employee. But then in the innovation-driven organization, failures are part of the normal routines, if you will. And then everybody will see failures as an opportunity to learn and to do better. So again, the whole perspective on failures is very different between these two models of competition or these two models of organizational culture. Now, what about the customers? The buyer who is going to come to your company and try to buy something from you. Now, obviously, from a buyer perspective, if I come to your company and your company is producing something that is quite similar to what other competitors have been producing, then there's less risk or less uncertainty because I already know something about this product. This is kind of an improved product or a product with a better efficiency or whatnot, but not quite different from what has been out there. But then if I'm a buyer and come to an innovative company and you are producing a very new product, I would be a little concerned, right? It's new. Would it work? So if that is the case, that means I have a higher uncertainty on my part in order for me to overcome, if you will, in order for me to come buy your product. So what can you as a seller to help me make that decision? Trust is very important here. If I trust your brand, if I trust your company, if I trust your management, and you produce an innovative product, that will make it easier for me to buy your product. But if I don't trust your brand, if I don't trust your management, if I don't trust your organization, you are an innovative company, you will be more difficult to sell your products. And this, from my perspective as a buyer, as a customer, I will have to take a lot more courage, if you will, to buy from you because you don't have a trustworthy history or brand name or image. Now, so all these items are here to help you develop a mental image, if you will, about what I call a efficiency-based competition versus innovation-based competition. Or you can also think about this as representing two types of organizational culture. An efficiency culture versus an innovation culture. How the employees will interact, how the conversation might take place, what these organizations, companies might focus on. And let me just give you some examples here. Now, again, these are not perfect examples, but I think once you see the examples, you will be able to make maybe some connection here. Now, in the case of General Electric, for those of us who are business professors who study companies, I think under Jack Welch, most of us would say that, well, that's more of an efficiency-driven company, operations efficiency. And then Jack Immelt wanted to change it, but recently the news about GE is not too positive, so maybe he has not done enough work to change the culture of GE. But in fact, he had tried very hard to try to change GE from more of an efficiency-oriented company to more of an innovation-driven or innovation-oriented company. And then in terms of countries or cities or regions, Singapore and Hong Kong are well known to be very efficient. And China is trying to be also to be efficient in manufacturing. And then if you look at the right-hand side, in regard to innovation, more recently, we have a lot of indicators coming out showing that Israel, the US, and also Japan too, are very innovative in many of their commercial products and services. And then South Korea, of course, recently has a great emphasis on design, and that's also part of the innovation portfolio, if you will. So I just wanted to maybe paint a picture, even though some of the items may not be perfectly suited for the examples, but I want you to have this mental image of what might be an efficiency-based competition model and also an innovation-based competition model. All right, now, here I'm going to give you a little lecture, if you will, on innovation, because innovation is a term that has been used so frequently these days. And very often, when two people talk about innovation, they may be talking about two very different things. So I'm going to maybe give you some definitions to help us have maybe a similar set of vocabulary as we talk about innovation and competition. The first is innovation comes in different shapes and forms. And at least in the way that I study innovation, I think about three categories of innovations, or maybe three levels of innovation. The first, of course, is the incremental innovations. This represents the majority of the innovations that we see, particularly in the commercial world. And I have some examples here. You know, when you have iPhone 5 going to iPhone 6, basically it's an incremental innovation. Nothing, big jump in that particular change of product, if you will. And then the next one is what I call the recombinant innovation. And this is an innovation that involves combining different innovation components that have already been developed out there. But then you find a way to combine them in a very creative way and out come a very exciting, functional, with improvements product. Now the iPhone, as a matter of fact, is really not a breakthrough innovation, but it is a recombinant innovation with a lot of components that are already out there. And then the last one is what I call the breakthrough or the radical innovation. Jet engine would be an example. And then the transistor would be another example. The magnetic resonance imaging is another example. So at least in my mind, when we talk about innovation, I want to be clear, are we talking about the same category of innovation? When we say that this company is very innovative, what does that mean? Does it mean that this company is very innovative in all three categories? or just in one of the three. Or maybe you're comparing two companies. One is very innovative in the incremental category, but the other one is very innovative in the recombination type of innovation. So we have to be a little bit careful when we talk about innovation and try to compare across companies and also across countries. What type of innovation are we talking about? And then this next item has to do with, again, different types of innovation. We talk about the product innovation, the service innovation, or the process innovation. And then we also have the technological innovations versus more of the organizational or administrative innovation. Now, all these are innovations in different areas. And again, we have to be a little bit careful when we say that this company is very innovative. In what particular areas? Is it product, process? Is it technological? Or is it administrative, organizational? In fact, some companies that are very innovative in the organizational area turn out to be very profitable, very competitive. They don't have to come up with new products or new services, but they have a very innovative kind of organizational form, and that form allows them to be certain advantages that outperform other competitors. Now, another concept that is important is the business model, if you will. And here we have 4 dimensions. One is the offerings, that's the products or the services. And then we have the customer experience. And in the case of Starbucks and Apple, it's not really the offering or the product that is the most important part. The other part, which is also very important, is that they are very creative in providing a customer experience that is unique. So a lot of people go to Starbucks not because they really like the coffee, but they like the experience of it. Going to Starbucks is the experience, not so much the coffee. And then the third item has to do with internal processes. In the case of Dell and Toyota, we know about some of the internal operational processes are superior to all the other competitors. And then the last one has to do how do you deliver your product. USA Today, way back when they had to deliver both the print form and also the digital form or on online delivery. So again, what I'm trying to say here is when we talk about innovation, talk about business model innovation, there are 4 dimensions along which you can think about it. A company can be innovative on all 4 dimensions, or maybe just 1 or 2 of the dimensions. So as a company, you may want to think about, hey, which of these 4 dimensions do we want to focus on in order to build a competitive advantage? Now, the last item I'm going to talk a little bit about is the concept of disruptive innovation. Now, these days, the term disruptive innovation is used so often by so many different people. And a lot of times, maybe we are talking about different things. But the word disruptive is so popular, so intriguing, that we feel good talking about disruptive innovation. So what is it? Well, if you go back to the work of Christensen in particular, he and his co-authors recently published a piece in Harvard Business Review, the 2015 Harvard Business Review, where Christensen and his co-authors review how the concept has been used. And they were not too happy about how the concept has been used because it has been used in so many different ways. So here, maybe let me share with you that is my understanding of the concept. First of all, the concept does not refer to a product or a service. In fact, the concept refers to, as Christensen and his co-authors say in that article 2015, it refers to a process, a disruptive process. And that process has to do with how new entrants coming into an industry compete against the establishments or the incumbents. And they talk specifically about 2 areas where new entrants establish a foothold, if you will. One is they will find a low-end foothold, like in the case of the airline. Southwest Airline would be a good example of it. Low cost, no thrills, if you will. And then gradually they build up the product and the service, and then they are able to compete against the big guys. The same is true with Honda when they started with the motorcycle and then the little car and so on and so forth. And then the other one is not so much that they start out with a low-end foothold, but they start out with a niche that has not been in existence. In the case of the photocopier, Xerox was the dominant player, and then the librarians and a lot of the professionals wanted to make copy, but they could not afford a huge Xerox machine. Then comes the new entrants, the smaller companies, build a personal copier. So it's a process through which new entrants compete against the incumbents. That is what the disruptive innovation concept is about. It's not about a particular product or a particular service. So I would like to at least bring this to your attention, that when we use the term, the concept of disruptive innovation, it refers to a process that is disrupting the competitive dynamics, if you will, of an industry. All right, now, the next thing I'm going to talk about has to do with the S-curve, innovation and the S-curve. And here there are two important concepts that we need to know about, and these two concepts will help companies manage innovation in a way that will be more beneficial to them. The first one is what I call innovation adoption rate. So that means you are a company, you are introducing a new product, and what is the rate at which your new product will be adopted by the consumers. And here the S-curve is a very good illustration of how your new product will be adopted over time. And what it shows is that initially, very few people will be buying your innovative product. And then the more novel your product is, the longer this period will be, with a very low level of sales. But then it will take off at some point, and here you will see a rapid increase in the adoption rate of the innovation, and then it will taper off later. So this has been shown to be true with many of the innovative products and services, and that's what we call the adoption innovation rate. And then the other one has to do with innovation adoption benefit. That is the benefit to the user or to the buyer with an innovative product or innovative process. Now just think about you being a PC user, and then suddenly you decided to buy a Mac. Will you be productive the next 2 weeks? I don't think so. I went through that. 6, 7 years ago, I decided to switch from PC to Mac. It took me almost 6 months to learn how to use the Mac. So what does that mean? What that means is that the innovation benefit to me as a user initially is negative. But then once I master it, then I begin to benefit from the innovation. And then again, it will taper off later. So again, this is an important concept for us to understand, particularly if you are managing a company, trying to either adopt new technologies and or producing new products for sale. Now, what are the management implications here? In regards to innovation adoption rate, if you want to increase the rate or shorten the duration where you have a low volume of sales, then there are two things you may want to consider doing. One is, of course, promotion. Many people would suggest it to you as a promotion to introduce the new product. But the second thing, which is also very important, remember something that I mentioned earlier. If you are selling a new product, the buyer will face high uncertainty about your product. So how do you get the buyer to buy your new product with high uncertainty? You have to provide assurance to them. You have to build confidence. And one example is Hyundai. I don't know how many of you know about the situation in the US. Was it about 10, 15 years ago when Hyundai came out with this, 10-year warranty? If you buy a Honda in 10 years, you have any trouble, bring it to us, we fix it. That is assurance. That is protection for the consumer, because they don't know much about your product, your company. The same is true with an innovative company trying to sell an innovative product. The more novel the product is, the more assurance you will have to provide to the consumer. so that they will buy your product. And then if you can do that, it will shorten that duration where you have low volume, and then hopefully that short duration will lead to a quicker upswing of sales. And then what about the other one? That has to do with innovation adoption benefit. And we know that initially you won't benefit from it. It will be a negative benefit. Now the goal is, can you flatten it? Can you shorten that particular period whereby you will be suffering from, instead of benefiting from the innovation? Well, I think it can be done, at least in one way, is better preparation. Just again, take the example of you switching from a PC to a Mac. I did not attend any of the training workshops at the Apple store. I thought I could figure it out. And of course, I could not. So I didn't have much preparation. So there's a way to address the S-curve, preparation. You have to be prepared. You have to put in upfront effort so that you can benefit from the innovation more immediately. So again, these are management implications. And you will know what to do if you understand the S-curve. And the S-curve is quite representative of many things surrounding innovation. All right, I'm going to go over this one slide quickly here, because this in itself can be a 3-hour lecture. Is how do you manage, or what kind of innovation strategies would you like to adopt? If you are an established firm, or if you are a startup firm. And what I would recommend to companies for the established firms is that you have to think about all three categories: the breakthrough or the radical innovations for the long term. You have to think about the recombinant innovations for the medium term, and then the incremental innovations for the short term. Now, it is very difficult for a company to be able to do all three, but there are ways to do it, and there's a whole literature out there advising how companies can do that. Now, in the case of the startup companies, new entrants coming into an industry, how do you compete against the incumbents? And again, there's a whole literature out there, and a simple advice from the literature is that when you don't try to compete head-on with established firms, you want to find a market niche where the established companies have neglected. And then you go in there, establish a foothold, and then you try to build up the process following the disruptive innovation story, if you will. And again, that will be something that startup companies would benefit from it. All right, here comes the last part of my talk. And I'm going to share maybe 5 or 6 observations with you. And I'm hoping that in the audience, particularly those of you who are working in industry, will participate in the conversation later on, because I want to find out whether my observations have any validity to what I'm going to say about Hong Kong firms and the Hong Kong industry. The first one is, I'm originally from Hong Kong, but I have been away for almost 40 years. I left Hong Kong in 1970. I've been back on and off, but obviously I do not know enough about Hong Kong, as you do. But based on what I have read, my sense is that the culture of Hong Kong, both the business culture and the societal culture in general, is not quite compatible with the innovation-driven competition model. It's more compatible with the efficiency-driven competition model. And there are many reasons for it. We can talk about the reasons later. And then another thing is that when I talk with business executives, local executives, about innovation, they all endorse it. Great, we want to do it. But when it comes to actually invest in innovation, actually trying to do it, they back off. And the reason is the S-curve. The S-curve. Particularly, the negative part of the S-curve is that innovation might not bring immediate benefits. It will take a while for innovation to bring benefits to the company. And a lot of the executives are reluctant to go through the initial period with little to show, if you will, in terms of innovation investment. It takes time for innovation to bring benefits to the company. And then the third one, again, is my observation, is that, well, many employees would like to innovate at work. They have been held back, mostly by the educational experiences, in that they are conditioned to play it safe and also to take orders, as opposed to coming out with original ideas, test them out, experiment, and then learn from failures. Again, it doesn't seem to be quite acceptable here in the Hong Kong environment. Again, correct me if I'm wrong. I would like to learn more about the culture of Hong Kong. Now, there might be several things here that could help turn around things. One is, we do know that there are a lot of mainland firms these days that are quite innovative, and they are really outperforming many of the local firms in Hong Kong. Now, maybe that would be a motivator for the local firms to compete, to come up with new things to do, and then keep that competition going, and eventually come back and win some competitive games. So that might be one way to look at the situation here. And then the other thing which is also important is that, based on at least what I know about the educational system here, we do need quite a bit of educational reform to train the next generation of the workforce and also the business leaders to have more of a originality orientation. We have to come up with original ideas to compete and get a competitive advantage versus the other competitors. And then the last one that I want to share with you is organization design, or different forms of organizing a company. And we need to consider redesigning or adopting new forms of organization for companies in order to facilitate, encourage, and reward innovation. Now, before I end, I want to come back to the two puzzles. How many of you got this one solved? Raise your hand. All right, we have one person. Anyone else? Just one? The first one. Anyone solve this problem? Why don't you tell us a little bit how you solved this problem?
Thank you. I start from the bottom, and the first, extend a little bit to be beyond. And
Okay.
then I
Beyond, that means go what?
go to one dot further.
Further.
Yes,
Okay. All
outside
right. So
of
you
this
draw
three.
that way.
Yeah.
All right.
And then I move up,
You move up.
and then the on the right, the first one on the right, on second row, and then the connect to the first line, the second dot, and then even go upper one line,
Okay.
and then coming down, and then triangular to the yeah.
All right. Do you all want to try that? What that means is you have to extend the line beyond the implicit box.
Yes, that's right.
There are 9 dots there, and most of us assume that you cannot extend the line beyond the box. And I didn't say that, right? I didn't say you could not extend the line beyond the box. So that's how the phrase, think outside the box, comes from. We like to box ourselves, even though, no one told us that we have to stay inside that box. We make assumptions. A lot of time we make assumptions, and we don't challenge the assumptions. But in this case, if you make the assumption that your line or the lines that you draw cannot extend beyond the implicit box, you will never solve the problem. Something has to do with our mindset. What about the second one? Did anyone solve the second one? Well, let's try another person. Yes. Would you please give her the microphone so she can tell us what to do? Use the scale only 2 times.
I'm sure they know. You pick up 6 out of 8, so you have 3 on one side and 3 on the other side. If they have equal weighting, then the remaining 2, then you can weight the remaining 2 and find the heaviest one.
Okay.
Yeah. If of the 6, if you find that one side is heavier, then you take that 3 and take 2 out of that 3 and weight them. And if they have equal weighting, then the one left is the heavier. Right, so that's.
Or you can tell if one is heavier, then the scale will tip, right? Now again, this is a very illustrative exercise because most of us would start with what? 4 and 4, not 3 and 3. Why? I didn't tell you that you had to start with 4 and 4, but again, we make the assumption that we had to start with 4 and 4. Now that's symmetrical thinking. Somehow we human beings are socialized to think in symmetrical terms. So we like symmetry as opposed to asymmetry. So when I give you 8 balls, symmetrical bias or symmetry bias will tell us 4 and 4. The minute you go with 4 and 4, you are stuck. You cannot solve the problem. So what I would like to illustrate with these 2 exercises is that a lot of times we are not very innovative because we box ourselves in, because we make assumptions, because of socialization, because of all the things that have been going on over the years that condition us to think in certain ways. And that is not helping innovation. So the place to start would be to try to free up your mind, and maybe take a vacation would help, or maybe something else. So let me stop here. Thank you very much. Happy to answer questions.